May 26, 2026 would have been the 100th birthday of jazz legend Miles Davis, the original king of cool. I know many of us have a deep admiration and respect for who he was and how he continually changed the game. So this video is in his honor. However, rather than just go through his history, I felt like sharing some fun facts that may be lesser known. And for this video's charity, I'll be donating $1 for every view up to 500 to two families in Gaza, Sister Naveen's family and Brother Mahmoud's family. I'll share the donation links in the bio if you would like to donate directly. So let's get into it. In a parallel world, did you know that Miles Davis might have been a violinist? Yep, his parents were well off and his mom wanted him to play classical violin. But thank God, Miles picked up the trumpet as sort of a teenage rebellion against his mother's upper class expectations. Critics and music historians in the mid 20th century love to push the narrative that brilliant jazz could only be born out of extreme poverty and street level suffering, but Miles absolutely hated this assumption and spent his life rejecting that idea.
My father's rich, my mom is good looking, right? And I can play the blues. I never suffered and don't intend to suffer.
As I mentioned, his family was well off. And fun fact, his father, also named Miles Davis, was actually a Freemason. As many of us know, Miles even went to Juilliard and dropped out because he wanted to play live. Like, this is common knowledge if you've seen a documentary or read his autobiography. While most people knew Miles was intense and passionate, his physical prep before stepping on stage was almost pathological. He modeled his pre-show routine directly after boxing legends like Joe Louis and Sugar Ray Robinson, who he looked up to and respected. He had these very specific pre-show rituals similar to the mindset of a fighter. For example, before shows, Miles was hyper-focused. There are reports that Miles didn't like to even shake hands with anyone before a gig, claiming that natural oils from other people's skin would transfer to his fingers and alter the tactile friction and spatial feedback he needed when hitting the trumpet valves. But I could not find a valid source on this, though biographies and accounts from his bandmates confirm he hated being bothered right before hitting the stage because he was hyper-focused. Like, if a promoter or fan tried to approach him for a glad handing session right before a set, he would absolutely blow them off. And like many athletes, he also completely banned himself from food and sex right before a performance. He believed that to create a truly disruptive music, he needed to stand on stage feeling actively hungry, unsatisfied, and restless. Now, as you can see, Miles was perhaps a bit restless, a bit of a perfectionist, and a bit ruthless. Refusing to eat, get laid, and shake hands before a show indicates that he cared more about the performance rather than making friends and pre-gaming. This ruthless quality is also evident in a moment he had with Bill Evans. Blue and Green on the album Kind of Blue is considered as one of the most defining tracks in jazz music, but it has been speculated that it wasn't written solely by Miles, despite it being credited to him at the time on the LP. One day, Bill asked Miles about getting credit and royalties, and Miles didn't even argue. He just calmly took out his checkbook, wrote a check for $25, and walked away. The track currently is credited to both Davis and Evans, though Evans and other musicians claim it was purely Evans, but I don't know. There's mixed speculation. If you have any opinions on this, please drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Now, I want to touch on a story that many of those hip to Miles knows, but those who don't ought to know because it explains some of his attitudes regarding race relations. After Kind of Blue came out, a 30-year-old Miles was walking a blonde woman to a taxi while on break for a recording session at the Birdland nightclub. A pig told him to move on, and Miles told him that he was working at the club and refused to move. And for no reason, like they usually do, the pig surrounded him, beat him in the stomach and head, and arrested him. He was charged with assaulting an officer and then taken to a hospital where he needed 5 stitches. Though he was eventually acquitted, meaning not guilty, he later stated the incident, quote, changed my whole life and attitude again, made me feel bitter and cynical when I was starting to feel good about the things that had changed in this country. Sadly, not much has changed with police brutality and unjust abuse of power in this country and perhaps around the world. But as we discussed, Miles was a fighter. He was ruthless, so he did go on to release many amazing albums for the next 15 years, until 1975 when he pretty much stopped playing the trumpet for about 5 years. I think that bitterness combined with restlessness is an easy recipe for burnout. So he understandably vanished from public life and locked himself away in his Manhattan brownstone. The common narrative is just drugs, but the physical reality was his body was breaking down. He had an artificial hip implant fail, massive throat polyp surgeries, a bleeding ulcer, and severe pneumonia. During this 5-year hiatus, he did briefly take up the organ, but Larry Coryell turned down a spot in the band Miles tried to form, so Miles went back to a reclusive lifestyle for a little longer. He did make his comeback, though, in the 80s, but he had felt he had lost some of his lipping, meaning the use of the lips, facial muscles, tongue, and teeth. He also suffered a stroke, which temporarily paralyzed his right hand. However, his ever-loyal companion Cecily Tyson helped him recover, and even encouraged him to paint and draw, which remained a lifelong passion. He compared music to painting in an interview with Japanese jazz journalist Takao Ogawa and said, quote, I'm interested in line and color. Line is like phrase and coding colors is like code. When I see good paintings, I hear good music. That is why my paintings are the same as my music. They are different than any paintings. Once he got back to playing, he did quite a lot of collaborations in various genres. Some that I thought were really interesting was with a new wave band called Scritti Politti, Prince, and in the 1985 protest song Sung City as a member of Artists United Against Apartheid. He also did some acting too and kept touring. This man was like in his 60s at this point and kept moving. But sadly, in September 1991, after repeated bouts of bronchial pneumonia, doctors suggested a tracheal tube, which pissed Miles off so much that he had a brain hemorrhage and was put into a coma. After several days on life support, his machine was turned off and he passed away on September 28th, 1991. So, as you can see, Miles Davis wasn't just a jazz pioneer or revolutionary. The man was a fighter. The man was all about his passion. And I think in a world where the powers that be want to strip away our will to fight for what we love, there's something that we can learn from Miles Davis. Don't give up on yourself or your passion. Fight till your last breath. It's what Miles Davis would have wanted. So thank you for watching. As always, I hope you have a blessed week. Summer's coming, so maybe listen to Summertime by Miles Davis. I highly recommend it. And thank you again. Hope to see you next week. God bless you. Till next time. Oh, and sorry, one last thing. The grave of Miles Davis is located in the Bronx at the Woodlawn Cemetery. So if you want to wish him happy birthday anytime, May 26th, go ahead. Do it.